Welcome to Nugget Shooter Journals. Today we're going to start a series. It's going to be several parts. And I really have no set direction I'm going to go other than I know exactly what I want to try to help folks with. Um, Metal detecting for gold can be quite frustrating at first and actually a little bit difficult. And I think I'm going to go into a series to show you what supposedly the magic is that we have that helps us to find gold on a regular basis when a lot of other people spend a lot of time finding no gold. Um, the only magic we really have, my friends, is research and getting out there and working really hard. There's nothing easy about this. I know sometimes on YouTube videos it looks like these guys are just going out and picking a spot and swinging the detector and finding gold. And to tell you the truth, when I first started metal detecting, I thought that's all there was to it. And I would go out there with my detector and quite a bit out here at the San Domingo district near my home, because when I first started out, I actually lived in Apache Junction, Arizona. And I would come up here and I would hunt for half a day, get burned out, find nothing but boot tacks and garbage, and go down and run my dry washer and get a nice little smile in the pan at the end of the day when I got done panning it, and I was happy because I had gold. But I could never get a darn nugget. And I was walking on top of hills, I was walking out in the flats, I was hunting the washes. I thought I was doing everything right, and I really wasn't. Number one, there's an old saying with us guys that metal detect and prospectors in general. That's go where gold's been found before. And my friends, that is really important, to go where gold has been found before for several reasons. Okay, one is education. Okay, you're in a new area, you know gold's been found there before. You can tell yourself, I need to learn why the gold was here. That's one of the main keys of understanding how to go out and find gold with a detector or without one. Know why the gold was there. There's several publications out there, and we're going to go into that later, some of the publications I use, how I use them, and how I use them to actually put myself into areas where I feel like I've got a really good chance of finding some nice gold. Number one is join a club. There's several good clubs out there, and by joining a club, you're able to get yourself out into the field on an area where gold has been found before. And it's up to you at that point whether you just kind of walk around and hope to get lucky or actually do the research to find out why you're in that spot. Yeah, why you're in that spot. Okay, I give seminars and I talk to a lot of people over the years. And one of the main questions I always ask people is, why are you here? Why are you at this spot? Why are you hunting here? Well, because the claim's in the book, or because Jim Bob told me to come out here. You don't have the information needed yet at that point that would guarantee success. Just because someone told you there's gold in an area, or just because you're on a club claim, doesn't mean that you're free from the burden of having to learn why you're there in the first place, my friends. Where was the gold found? How was it found? What was it found with? When was it found? How old is the placer deposit? 5 million years? 10 million years? 30 million years? Longer? How was it laid down? What are the placer gravels consisting of? These are all very important things, especially to the nugget hunter. And if you don't know why you're in the spot you're in, you're going to hinder yourself, and it's going to slow your results down quite a bit as far as good results go. And like I said, I used to go out there and I would hunt and hunt and hunt and always go back to my dry washer. And I met a lot of guys back in the old days that were really good at metal detecting. But back in the late 80s and early 90s, nobody wanted to share information with anybody. They just didn't want to share. And you'd meet people and first thing out of your mouth when you're a greenhorn is, where'd you find that? And most people aren't going to tell you where they found that. And I did get lucky and meet some people that were willing to kind of take me under their wing. And they taught me the same thing I'm teaching you right now, is to learn why you're in a particular spot, what the characteristics of the gold is, or if there's even a nugget gold there. There are places where nuggets are very few and far between. It would take a man an awful long time and an awful lot of hunting just to get one. Another big advantage of having an education about the spot you plan on hunting is simply that you know where to start when you get there. And it saves you a lot of time beating the brush and wondering if there's even gold where you're hunting. And knowing how the old timers actually worked the ground is very important. Out here in the deserts, it's totally different than hunting in places like Oregon or Washington in many cases. We're on the bare bones of the earth here. And hunting nuggets is a little bit easier when you don't have a lot of brush or overburden. And don't get me wrong, there's places with a lot of overburden here, but a lot of the places I hunt, I'm hunting right on bedrock or real close to it. And it gives me a distinct advantage. But it also gave the old timers an advantage. They were able to clean areas out quite well. And the thing you got to remember is the old timers, no matter how good they were, no matter what equipment they had, they weren't able to work every bit of ground with a pick and shovel or equipment. They always left gold, and they always, in a lot of cases, left a lot of nuggets. For instance, a dry washer. You've got a piece of equipment with a grizzly, and then you've got it going one way, and you've got a tray processing the other way. So before the material gets to the processing tray of the dry washer, it's got to be dumped through a grizzly. It takes out the huge rocks so the machine don't get clogged up. All right, well, you take off those big rocks, you're working all day long, and you can't see a dirty nugget when it slides off that pile into your, or off that grizzly into your tailings pile. And the old timers knew they were losing some gold that way. But they didn't care. They were finding so much gold processing the dirt that they could efficiently process that one or two larger nuggets sliding off and being lost wasn't that big a deal to them. But it is a big deal to us. And actually the first place I ever found a gold nugget with a metal detector was my own dry wash grizzly pile. A coarse header pile, we call that. And I had loaded up all my equipment and walked past that pile no more than 5 or 6 times, looking right at it. And I came back down with my metal detector and went over the top of the pile and immediately got a signal. And I looked down and I could see it laying there. And it was a nugget about a pennyweight, good sized nugget, so a couple grams worth, laying right on top of that tailings pile. And I looked at that nugget and I couldn't believe it. I'd found my first gold nugget. But then I looked around at me at all the tailings piles that were in that wash that I was in, from the old timers and from club members and whatnot, and a little light bulb went off in my hard head. And I thought, I'm going to start hunting these tailings piles. If I lost a nugget in mine, just like the book said, then there's nuggets in these other piles. And you know what? There were. And geez, out here at San Domingo, it seems, I think back and it's almost like every single pile had a nugget in it. And of course that's not true, but a lot of them did. And a lot of them had multiple nuggets, and I also found some cool relics in these piles. These guys lost a lot of stuff in those tailings piles. But the biggest thing I think I got out of that first nugget was I learned I could find gold with a metal detector. The confidence boost that gave me was incredible. At that point, I knew I could do this. I knew the machine worked. And I don't know, it's gone pretty well for me since those days. And one of my mentors, a fellow by the name of Jim Strait, a lot of you probably heard of him. We just lost Jim recently. I guess we all wear out eventually, right? But we lost Jim. But when I first met him, he really popped my bubble, because he was my mentor. He was the guy that I thought was just the cat's meow for finding gold. And he'd found a lot of gold, metal detecting, Nevada, Arizona, California, all over. And I got to talking to Jim. They used to call him Tailgate back then. And he was sitting in his truck, and I was talking to him. And I told him how much I admired him and everything. I told him, well, I've been hunting gold, and I'm having trouble, and I'm just not finding what I expect to find. And he looked right at me, and he told me I was doing it wrong. My heart sunk. Here's my mentor, and I'm all proud of myself for what I've learned to this point, and he's telling me I'm doing it wrong. And he directed me to a book he had written, and kind of took me under his wing with a couple other people and taught me quite a bit. And over the years, Jim taught me more than probably any one individual that's in this hobby or business or whatever you want to call it. And the main thing he taught me was to do research. Don't ever walk into an area without knowing why you're there. When I first started out, I used to sit at home and look into books, which there were very few of back then, and try to decide where I was going to go next. I'd pick out a spot, I'd load up everything I needed, get the dog, and off we'd go. Metal detector in hand. And I'd drive out to that new spot that looked so familiar when I was reading about it. We didn't have computers back then. That spot I was reading about, and I'd get out of my truck and I'd look around and I'd think to myself, geez, Bill, where do you start? And you look around at all this vast area, and I just didn't know where to start. Now, when I go out to a spot, I already know what I'm looking for out there. I'm looking for several things. I'm looking for where the old timers were working before. I already know how they were working, whether it was dry washing, whether it's heavy equipment, whether they're sluicing, whether they're dredging. I know these things already because I've read about it. Okay, I look for spots where they had worked before. And I like finding little washes and gullies that have been dry washed because, like I said earlier, you can't get it all with a pick and shovel. So there's a whole lot of gold left on the banks and along those washers on benches and whatnot that they just couldn't run all that dirt, hoping there might be just one nugget in there. But I can hunt those areas hoping for one nugget with a metal detector, and it works quite well. I also know what that placer is about. I know how old it is. I know what the average size nuggets were. I know what the largest nuggets were. And I know what the main gold that they processed consisted of, whether it was a whole lot of fines with a few nuggets or a whole lot of nuggets and a few fines, anywhere in that mix. And I've got this information in my head. All right, so I'm looking around instead of wondering, looking at this vast area going, where the heck do I start? I'm looking around going, okay, where's the spots that I read about, I've learned about that I want to go? And it makes a huge difference. Okay, number one, my confidence level's up because I've already studied the area and I know what I'm looking for. And I get my butt out there and I look for it. And I'll tell you what, probably well over 60% of the time, I'm pretty successful with this technique. And coming up in these upcoming videos that are going to be in this series, I'm going to teach you how I go about finding a new area. Because the big advantage that we have now, my friends, is a computer, and we have books, there's just multitudes of information out there. I go to libraries, look up old articles. One of my best placer spots around here was simply found because I found a little article about some people that had a picnic, and Uncle Jake or George or Bob or whatever the heck his name was had gone out to the wash and found some gold. All right, I went back to that spot, identified that wash, found it, and found some gold. Another lead that I got was a simple lead about a guy come into trailer park where I was doing property management, and he got to talking to me, and he says, you know, back when I was young, we used to go out sheep hunting in this area, and my grandpa would always go with, but he didn't hunt. He would take his little handheld dry washer, little hand puffer type deal, little thing, and he would go home with a baby food jar full of nuggets at the end of the hunting trip, which they went up there a few days to a week at a time. I hear these stories all the time, so I'm kind of like, yeah, taking it with a grain of salt. But then he gave me a set of landmarks and directions to find the area. Okay, well, that gave me a little more confidence on that. And I went out there, a friend of mine and me went out there. It took us 3 times because he was a young guy when they were going up there. He had his landmarks mixed up. So where one landmark should have been, it wasn't. But we ended up finding one by accident while coming back from up on a huge basalt hill that was supposed to be where we were looking, and it had something to do with the sheep tank and a bunch of other things. Well, it turns out the sheep tank should have been the last of the three landmarks we were looking for, not the first. So we came back and we ended up finding a smelter we were looking for. Really cool smelter, all hand done, hand built by hand with rock. And then we found the actual cuts where they were digging out this rich material. And out of that area, I still get gold every time I go there. And I pulled, to this point, to this day, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of several pounds out of there. Yeah, several pounds. One hole I dug had several nuggets in it, and all of them are big ones, good sized ones. So that's another way you can identify spots. Okay, but here's the kicker on that one. It wasn't in the books. No, it wasn't in the books. I did find a map that had a name of the mine I was told to look for, but it was not in any of the books. And this area was not listed as a placer gold area at all. But the gold that I was told about, and the gold from that mine, was free milling gold. Okay, which usually means there could be nuggets in the area. Free milling gold is where they're breaking up the rock and looking at it, and they can see the gold in the rock. Okay, and for the nugget hunter, those are the type of areas we look for in areas that are known for hard rock mining. A lot of the hard rock mining areas, they didn't concentrate on the placer gold. Some they did, some they didn't. And you can go to these areas and hunt the little washes close to the mines and stuff and do pretty good, along with all the junk they threw in there. So anyway, this is just kind of a lead up into what I'm going to be doing. And like I said, I'm going to be doing it over the next several weeks, putting these together. And I'm going to do my best to give you folks an idea of how I actually go about starting from scratch and getting into an area and finding gold in that area. So for now, stay tuned, because this stuff's going to help you find gold. I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and I feel it's time now for me to start sharing some of this information and some of my secrets. And no, I'm not going to go and give you a written map, a secret map to any area in particular, but I'm going to give you an ability to make your own secret map into an area by doing the research, using the tools that are available through the computer and stuff now, and making intelligent decisions, informed decisions, and getting out there and getting some gold. So until part 2, Nugget Shooter out.